So I'm going to review some of my favorite wedding photos that I took last year in 2022, and I'm going to go through some of the things that I like about each photo, some of the things that I could have done better and improved, and some of the lessons that I learned. So I'm a wedding photographer here in Toronto. We shoot a lot in Southern Ontario, but we also shoot in the States as well. And I run this business with my wife, Allie, and something that we are big proponents of, and something that I've mentioned a lot on this channel, is reviewing your own work. I think it's really important to take a look at your work at the end of the year, at the end of a shoot, at some point, and really look at it and inspect it to see, what things did you do really well? What things could you really kind of bump up and improve on? And sit down and think about the actual lessons that you learned and write them down or something like that so that you actually learn from the work that you're doing. So I've pulled up a bunch of my photos from this last season. These are all kind of my favorite moments, or as I was looking through, they reminded me of something that I really learned in shooting in that moment. And so let's go through them. Okay, so the first one was one of the first weddings of our season last year, and it was a 2-day wedding event where the first day the bride and groom had this traditional outfits on, and they were incredibly beautiful. And the problem was that they wanted portraits done, and there was nowhere to take portraits. I'm talking about nowhere to take portraits. And we knew this ahead of time. And so what I did instead, in order to get that kind of look that we wanted, was actually we brought backgrounds and everything we needed to do portraits that kind of fit within our brand that they expected. And I actually used a hand-painted backdrop that I made a video about, and I used that as the backdrop to kind of tie in everything and make a really neutral, beautiful looking backdrop. And I learned so much through that. I learned, one, how important it is to kind of be thinking ahead of time and doing as much as possible to make the photos as good as possible. And if that means bringing a backdrop and shooting on that, then do it. So this was actually the next day when it was, their wedding photos we were taking. And something that is really, so I had this photo and another photo that I'm gonna show you. If you do any type of architecture photography or interiors photography, you're aware of patterns and reoccurring things, let's call it that. This is what I mean. So you can see this arch that she's standing in, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful photo. I love the photo. But one thing that I learned, and one thing that is very evident when you see this next photo, is that I decided to include part of the second arch. And what that does is it creates this sense in your mind that those arches just keep going on forever and ever and ever. And when you have something like that, I just think it feels more grand, or there's something about it where it just feels wow, this huge kind of facade with all these arches. And all I did was just add a little bit more of that arch. So kind of adding a repeating element in your photo can be really helpful in making it, a really statement piece, a statement photo. Up close photos and details of rings can be really kind of cool and fun, but sometimes not always usable for the couple. You don't always just need a product shot of your ring. And this was kind of a play on one of those kind of up close ring shots, but instead I kind of pulled out a little bit more so you can actually see the bouquet, you can see her hands, a little bit of her dress and everything. One thing that I kind of thought about later that I was maybe I could have done better with was just show even the tops of the bouquet. I kind of cut it off just at the top. And if you look at the top there's lots of kind of magical lens action going on right there. And there could have been even more of that if I just maybe tilted it up a little bit more to show more of the top of the bouquet. So that's somewhere maybe I could have improved that shot. This was something that I learned was this is another film shot. A lot of this is film, but it's easy to not play on film. It's easy to not try things because you're I need to get this shot, like it's film, like I can't be just like using this willy-nilly. But for this, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try like something where they're out of focus and this tree is in focus. And I almost didn't do it, but then I was like, no, I'm just gonna try something. And it turned out really beautifully. And I love kind of like the very atmospheric feeling. But it's easy not to want to try things and just to do things that like, you know are gonna work for sure. But in this case, it turned out, I think, pretty good. Here's another shot just from like a different angle. I love like he just like that was his own like decision just to like fix her hair. And say you get the couple in an area and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna take a photo of you here. It can be easy as a photographer to be so focused on setting them up to what you want that you're not photographing what's happening just before you tell them what to do. Because this is a good example of like, I was already setting up the shot and then I said, okay, you guys just like stand over there, like head over there. And then they stood and faced each other and then we're naturally doing things that were like perfect. And so that's something to think about, is like thinking about like, not just like what you want to shoot, but what happens before and after as well, because that can be some really great photos. Okay, this is a really fun thing. This is like, I don't know, lessons about photoshopping. As a wedding photographer, it can be hard to decide what you're gonna Photoshop and what you're not gonna Photoshop. And if you're a photographer, you know the points where, you know the times where you're like, oh, should we shoot here? Like, it's a really great spot. But in order for it to like work, I'm gonna need to like Photoshop some things out, right? And that can deter you. Well, this was one of the moments, this is actually the after shot and I have a before shot just before it, where I was like, do I do it? Do I wanna do the Photoshop? No, I have to, this is so beautiful. I have to do this and then I'll just Photoshop it out later. But maybe this is not a big deal to you, but this air conditioner was like horrible. I was like, oh, it's so ugly. But this is one of the moments where the big difference is like, this is right out of camera. So this doesn't have our preset on it, but I'm just showing you what a little bit of effort, well, actually it was a good bit of effort in order to get that air conditioner out. But what some effort like in a photo can just like make the difference of it. So the main areas that I fixed was the air conditioner and then just these cracks in the sidewalk. Where it's like, oh, it's just like cracks in the sidewalks, it's just there. But when you take those things out, it just pulls everything in the photo together and makes it just like, it brings a photo to a whole new level. And for this wedding, I knew that this was gonna be our first shot of the day. And I decided, as a wedding photographer, you typically charge people with hours, right? You have like so many hours per day. And the problem with that is sometimes as an artist, as a photographer, you want to be able to even spend more time on things than you have time. And this is a good example of where we just decided, I was like, you know what, I'm just coming early. I want to spend more time on this. I don't want to be rushed. I want time to play and to try things out. And I think it really turned out for us. Like, I think taking the extra time, we get all these florals from the florist. And you have to decide which flower is going on and like you gotta like cut it off and be careful with it. And so something that I learned was just like taking that extra time, even if it's on your own, even you're not getting paid for it, like taking that extra time can make your photos just like take them to a whole new level. And that's what I learned through this photo. Two things about this photo. The first is it's almost perfect. I would have loved just a little bit of more light on their face. So if I had maybe like a white card off to the right side and I could just bounce like a little bit more light onto them. I didn't have that luxury in that moment because there wasn't enough time, but I would have loved just like a touch more light just to clean up their faces a little bit more so it's a bit brighter. But other than that, I really like this shot. I know it's kind of just like a simple portrait of a couple, but something that I really liked about this was the time that I spent ahead of time. So I knew that I needed to take this shot. They were still talking to some other people. So in that time, I just spent the time like looking around the room, deciding like, okay, if they're gonna be there, how can I get kind of the most vibe of the reception in this shot? How can I get the best angle and all of those things? So by the time they just stepped in, it was a matter of just like stepping in, looking at me, 1, 2, okay, and go on. And so for them, it was really like seamless and it felt like, oh, that was so easy. But taking that extra time, and it can make such a huge difference. Like even to the extent of like, I purposely wanted a little bit of this chair in the front foreground. I wanted that in it just to create depth. I wanted a little bit of this chandelier in the top corner so that you could still see a little bit of that vibe. I wanted you to see the tables the whole way down to the tent so you could feel kind of what the nature of the reception felt like. And so even though it seems like a simple photo, taking that extra time just to like look around and find the best possible area goes a far way. Okay, I just need to show you this floral photo because I love it. One thing that I did learn about this is a little bit about like taking the rules and then playing with them a little bit. So rules that I've heard about shooting film is that, you know, if you have a portrait, if you have a subject here, you don't want to shoot with like a dark background behind because film doesn't do, or Portrait 400 isn't great with like kind of darker light, not enough light, right? And I had that in my mind as I was shooting this because I knew the background was darker than I've kind of been told that you should shoot at or whatever. And I was like, no, you know what? I want some of that contrast because she's so bright. The florals are so bright. If I move this to a really bright kind of background, I'm gonna lose some of that contrast and some of the difference. And so I'm really happy I broke the rules in this scenario because I love just the contrast of the background compared to with like her bright dress and these florals. I just wanted to show you that one. Okay, and this is another flat lay that I was talking about. This was a few weeks later, and I did the same thing. Came a little early and spent that extra time on my own, not being paid, to like make sure all the flower petals were perfect and all of these things. I learned this year to do multiple iterations of a flat lay. It's easy just to do like one flat lay and get everything in there and be done. But something that we tried was that because we had that extra time, we played with even more additional ideas and different layouts and different setups. So this was just, we took the invitation and then we added some florals around it, just as a different variation. And it was really fun because this composition feels so different. When you put them all together, it creates like this really beautiful collection of photos of their invitation suite. Also, sorry if you can like hear hammering and drilling. They are building a condo across the street and it's kind of loud today. So sorry about that. Okay, something that we started doing this year was taking drone photos. And something that I learned this year was that, my DJI Mini 2 does not do well in wind. So this was like the only time that I could actually fly it because it was such a windy day. Otherwise it was like not even able to stay in the air. But anyways, we've just found like adding this type of shot to our storytelling is just like, oh, I love it so much. It is really difficult though, because it's the two of us and it takes the two of us to just shoot a wedding normally. But to add the time to like fly the drone is quite complex. This is one of our kind of classic shots that we take in bride getting ready photos. And what this made me think of was how important it is to have kind of like set shots that you're going to do, whether it's in a wedding or you're gonna do a portrait session or anything like that, is to have ideas ahead of time so that you're not just in the moment kind of figuring out what to do. However, I don't think that you should only just have a list of photos and just kind of shoot those and hope it turns out well. I think there's a good balance of you know, when you're short on time and you have like 2.5 minutes to get great portraits, is to go down your list of like tried and true shots, get those done. And then if you have extra time, is like play and try different things that you don't normally shoot on a wedding day for us example. This was one of those scenarios where if you're not a photographer, or maybe you have like other people saying like where a good photo is to take, I don't know if you ever get this, but if you weren't a photographer, you wouldn't say to take a photo here, because if you looked just like a few feet this way, there were like cars here and there were like steps into the reception on this way. So there was just like one slice and there was only this one spot where the light was coming in perfectly from behind. And I was like, I have to take the photo from this direction. And so the only problem was that there was like trees and bushes where I needed to be. So I was just like, doesn't matter. I have a suit on, but I'm going to climb into these bushes to take the photo. And it just reminded me how important it is, especially when I got this roll of film pack. Was like, I love this image. I love like the wind blowing in her veil. I love the lighting, that light from behind that just like really magnifies the bokeh. And it just reminded me how important it is to like trust your gut. If you have an idea and you have like a vision of the photo, like work hard to get it and don't kind of get discouraged by other people being like, really? You're gonna take a photo from there? Like if you have a vision, like go for it and don't get discouraged by other people. I love this photo. A photo of a reception. I'm gonna skip that one. Okay, something that I really learned from taking this photo, and I have another example later on that like hits the same point, and that is how important it is to be always ready before and even after you like take the photo. So this bride was getting into this Rolls Royce, and I was ready before like I was gonna take the photo. I was ready to go just because I knew some friends and family were out looking at her, and I was like, she is 100% going to like wave or do something. And so I was just like ready and waiting like for her shot. And as soon as she like lifted out that hand, I was like, boom, I've got it. And so it just reminded me how important it is, especially when you're doing event coverage like this, is to be really aware of what's like going on around you and to kind of learn and practice how to anticipate moments. Because sometimes you get like a gut feeling where you're like, I think someone's gonna wave or someone's gonna do something. And this was one of those moments. This was just one of like my favorite photos because it like has the CN Tower in it, and we don't do like a lot of elopements, but we did elopements on the Toronto waterfront, and I thought this was just like really fun. Okay, going back to where I was talking about before about like spending that extra time, even, you know, before you're actually getting paid, to come in early to work on things. This is a good example. We had some extra time. We were finishing, you know, the flat lays, and we still had extra time. And I noticed, you know, a bottle of champagne that the bride was going to open with her bridesmaids. And instead of just kind of taking that photo of just like, oh, there's the champagne. Okay, let's take a photo of it. We were like, oh, why don't we like adorn it with flowers? This, I just wanted to show you because it's like a really beautiful floral shot that I was really proud of and I wanted to share with you. Okay, this shot, same bride, was in a very, you know, if you're a wedding photographer, I'm sure there are venues that you shoot a lot that are beautiful and they are very popular because they are beautiful. And the problem with that is that when you shoot at a location so many times, you want to like reinvent and you want to get a new angle and you want to try things different than what everybody, you know, shoots the same angle, the same shots. And at this location, everybody goes up to those steps at the pillars and they take a photo on the steps. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And so again, I spent some extra time and I ran out here and I checked out. I was like, I gotta find a new location. And I didn't know if it was gonna be possible. I was like, I've shot here so many times. I don't know if there's like a different spot that I can, you know, get what the client is looking for, but also be different than what everyone else is doing. And I just so happened to see this kind of like patch of shade from a tree. And I guess it was based on the time of day and the time of year that I hadn't really been able to ever shoot here before because otherwise it would be so bright. And sure enough, I found this spot and I was like, okay, let's try it. This is gonna be different than what people are used to, but I'm gonna try it. And I'm so happy with how it turned out. It really did feel like it was different. And it was one of those times where I also needed to like trust my gut because people were like, oh, what we shoot here is over there. Like, don't you want to go over there? Okay, I need to tell someone about this photo because it makes me really happy. And I'm sure, I don't know if most people care, but hopefully you will care. So this, I was shooting a roll of Delta 3200 on my contacts. and this couple was doing their first dance, and I looked down and I had one more photo of this roll left. And I could tell that they were getting near the end of the dance, and I was like, oh, I just want to get like a killer photo. Like I just want this one to count. And I just like looked at the situation and I got in the right position and I was like, okay, I feel like they're gonna do like one more little dip and they're gonna finish, and I think they're gonna finish right here. I was like, let's hope so. And so I got my contacts, I got it focused on the area there where I thought they would end up, and I waited a couple seconds, couple more seconds. I was like, oh, I hope this is the right idea. I hope this is the right idea. And sure enough, like boom, end of the dance, they stopped and he kind of like, leaned her back like this, and boom, I took the last photo on my roll and the camera rewound, and it felt very satisfying to just like, to take the last photo on your roll of film at the very end of the dance. And I just like, was like, I feel good. Another shot from that same couple. This is the last photo that I'll share with you. And that's kind of a combination of some of the big lessons that I've been talking about through this video. And that's like being kind of prepared ahead of time and using your gut and to kind of anticipate things that are gonna happen. And this couple, we actually got a review back from them, and they talked about this photo specifically and said like, somehow Luke and Allie captured this photo of my husband winking at me at a reception, and they were just like floored by it. They were so excited. And how this photo happened was that I looked over at them during the reception, and they were sitting down. People were still talking and milling, but they were just kind of sitting off to themselves. And I just had this like feeling about how they were interacting with each other. I was like, I feel like they're either gonna like give each other a kiss, or they're like talking and they're like, I don't know. It was just like a really good moment. So I set up my camera like ready to go. I was like, okay, how can I make this really beautiful? I was like, well, I'm gonna like layer it with some of the foliage from the reception and some of the florals. And then I just like waited and I waited, and I probably waited there for like maybe 20, 30 seconds. And they didn't realize that I was like sitting there just like waiting for them to do something. And then sure enough, they kind of finished the conversation, and then he winked and then turned away. And then I was like, boom, I got it and I captured it. And that just reminded me so much of how important it is to, be prepared ahead of time, like get set up and be in the perfect position at the right time. And then also just like following your instincts in terms of like knowing when things are gonna happen before they happen. And like, how do you do that? You practice. You practice and you keep your attention up at what's going on and in the things in front of you, and you be present. So anyways, those are some things that I learned from my last wedding season, and I hope it's helpful for you. I hope you can use some of those things in your own photography to make this year even better.